Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 424 and 425. Break through the Crimson Hell, Buggy's chaos-inducing plan, and the strongest man in prison, Poison Man Magellan, appears. In these episodes, I am so glad to be hanging out with Buggy again. I forgot what a goon this dude is. And also, the Poison Man. The Poison Man's a mess, y'all. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Gabby for commissioning this episode. I just want to remind everybody that next week I begin coverage of the One Piece live action. No. I said next week. I lie. Next recording session, which is Thursday. So, just so you guys all know, that shit is going to be a regular, One Piece animated episode recording, followed by a live action recording. It is going to be a lot of One Piece for a while, until I finish that season. And I'm really fascinated to see what it's like to watch both the animated and the live action and cover both at the same time. Because, guys, there are times where I realize how much this show has, gotten in my head. In terms of the way that it'll manifest in, dreams and stuff like that. And when I'm covering something with this level of uniqueness, I guess, something that is so extremely, I'm trying to think of the word here, distinctive. I think that's what I want. When I'm covering something this distinctive and I go into a real heavy coverage mode, it can really infiltrate my brain in a way that I don't understand is happening at the time. It's not until later that I'm kind of wow. And this sort of happened with covering The Haunting of Hill House. I was covering one episode, a recording session, but I was also doing live watches on my because I was so spooked by the show, I didn't want to watch by myself. I couldn't handle it. So that show definitely began to sort of worm its way into my head. So anyway, I really am excited about starting the live action. I have a couple of friends who are either not fans of the animated or sort of lukewarm fans who both said that the live action was great. So I'm excited. Okay. This is what a weird. So first, the chaos-inducing plan, which I have to confess is actually a pretty good idea. What Buggy does initially is he decides that he's going to let a bunch of prisoners out. And frankly, I'm here for it. This is not, I'm saying it's part of his plan, which it's really giving him some credit for something that is sort of accidental. But I enjoy that he has clearly quickly seen the advantage to to getting these guys to be his supporters. And, you know, considering that his crew has sort of turned their backs on him, there's a part of me that's just sort of like, well, this might be nice. Then Buggy will have a crew again, because I know he's going to be devastated when he finds out that these dudes did not have his back the way he was sort of expecting. I don't know why I should be rooting for Buggy, but I just can't help myself. He's such a disaster. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I really have to back up and start at the beginning. Apologies if my voice sounds weird, guys. I've been crying because we found Sam a home, and it's great news, but I'm also like gonna miss him so much, and it just keeps coming over me at times that I'm not expecting. So apologies for my my sad voice. All right. So this starts off, we're still in the midst of the attempt to escape, Buggy and, well, Buggy's attempt to escape, Luffy's attempt to find Ace. And I really love seeing, in comparison to Buggy, how much stronger Luffy has become. I keep imagining that his old rivals are going to have leveled up also. And it turns out that in many cases they have not. And so running across them again, I'm thinking that maybe they're a match for Luffy. And while they may be a match simply because Luffy is not being as cautious as he should be due to his open and honest heart, I mean, the expression when Buggy realizes that Luffy has taken down a bunch of these weird monsters by himself was pretty hilarious. But anyway, I am I'm trying to like figure out exactly where to start with these two, because there is a couple of different things that are going on simultaneously. So that bracelet on Luffy's arm that has, it's a weird looking thing that I had mentioned at one point because I didn't recall that Nami gave it to him out of like the treasure and he put it on his arm. And so I had forgotten about it, and everybody had to explain to me, like remind me what it was. And I should have like realized that something that significant, a change to like our main character's costume, when their costumes don't change often or in ways that are that significant. Like our guys will be wearing a different color shirt than last time, especially the guys. The girls have a bigger change in wardrobe that's much more dramatic depending. You know, sometimes Nami will be in shorts or a skirt, sometimes a dress. Like it really varies more. But like, say, let's take Frankie and his signature thing being that he's in a Speedo. If all of a sudden he was in shorts, that would be like, wait, oh, that's a pretty big change, you know? So Luffy having this like arm bracelet that he's never had before, you know, I'm willing to take it just as like, oh, this is a symbol of friendship because Nami gave it to me. But there was a part of me that was kind of like not thinking through that likely this was going to wind up becoming a thing later. I think that my expectation was going to be that maybe somebody would try and steal it from him, and because it was a gift from Nami, he would take extra offense to it. But I don't think I would ever have guessed that the bracelet itself was important. So they're in the midst of fighting these, I can't remember what they're called. I keep wanting to say bulgogi, but that's like it's a type of food. I don't even remember what it is. Blugori. Okay. So we have Buggy raising one of them into the air and spinning him like a top as he collapses down. And I had forgotten that aspect of his powers, that he could just sort of like lift you extremely high into the air because his hands are not attached to his body. So whether he can levitate does not matter. Now, Buggy does this and is feeling very confident about the fact that he has taken this thing down. It raises its head and begins to get up again. And you can see how stunned he is that he didn't take this thing out. He begins to run away from it. But then Buggy turns around and sees Luffy punching it out with a single punch. And he says, "You got a lot stronger, didn't you, kid?" To which Luffy says, "I don't know. These things are pretty tough. What are they?" And I wanted to be like, pretty tough? My guy, we just saw you literally level one in a single punch. Look, Luffy is not somebody who tends towards humility. I'm not saying he's conceited. But humility requires a type of tact and self-consciousness that Luffy just doesn't have. So, him saying, "I don't know," I was kind of like, that's weird. You should know. Oh, Blue Gory for blue gorillas. Okay. So this is when Buggy says, "It's no problem. We could take on the rest of them." And then he turns and sees all the other ones that Luffy has laid out and says, "Well, never mind. I guess you got to them already." Luffy says, "Well, I really hope that's the last of them because I don't have time to mess around." And it's a mark of, I think, how focused Luffy is about getting Ace out of jail. That as he goes along, there's no moments of consideration like, oh, should I let all of these prisoners out or not? It's not even entering his mind. I want to say, for the record, as much as I am in life an abolish prisons type person, and I say that with an asterisk that there are times where I feel like jail is the only solution for certain people, but by and large, it isn't the best choice for most criminals that we have in our system currently. A lot of people like to trot out the like, well, what about rapists whenever there's, and the thing would really, what it comes down to is rapists don't go to jail. Like that just doesn't happen often. So you're dealing with like a lot of nonviolent offenders oftentimes. And I want to just say that and be clear about it. Our justice system is also so deeply corrupt that a lot of the people in jail genuinely do not deserve to be there. And all that said, I don't just want Luffy to willy-nilly start letting prisoners out, because a lot of these people are truly terrible people. Like Mr. 3 is awful. We run into him later, was not expecting to see his ass again. I don't know if I remember the last time we saw him, whether or not it seemed like he was still alive. So I can't, I didn't expect to see him again, but I can't remember a specific thought of, oh, well, he's dead, so we'll never see him again. I don't know if it was that distinct. But yes, I'm sure a lot of these guys are genuinely, bad people. But also, we know the world government is so deeply corrupt that I can't help but think, well, there's also that, where we know Robin was about to be thrown in here for reasons that were completely unjust. And also, they're straight up torturing people for funsies. So to that extent, it's not just a jail. It's also, you're just handing people over to be tortured until they die, which is its own, ethical mire, Anyway, all that to say, I had thought Luffy would be a little bit more interested in letting everybody out along the way, or at least thinking about it, listening to the arguments of people. And he isn't. It's really Buggy is the one that's sort of weighing the pros and cons of what actually interfering in these other prisoners' lives, what that could do for him. So anyway, once Buggy realizes that Luffy is here to save Ace, he kind of freaks out. And it turns out he actually knows Ace. Ace appeared on the deck of his ship, and it was sort of an out of nowhere thing. We get a flashback here of, the ship and all of them laughing and joking around. Buggy's wearing this like really distinct green makeup that I hate so much. This green, it's not a look. I do not like this one little bit. But anyway, they are dancing and celebrating on the ship here. And we get, I can't remember her name. I always forget her name and want to say like Arima. But I know that is not it. Or Anita, Atira. I always like lose it, guys. But she is over here saying, is this really the time to celebrate when you don't have any idea where they are? Alvida, that's what it is. And he says, don't be such a party pooper. We'll find Luffy when we find him, so just calm down. And then Ace jumps in and says, if you're looking for Luffy, I can tell you where he is. And Buggy, without missing a beat, is like, see, there you go. This fellow can lead us straight to him at any time. And then all of a sudden stops and is like, wait a minute, who the hell are you? Doesn't seem to have noticed Ace's presence. And I don't know how long Ace has actually been there, And he says, sorry for crashing your party. The name's Ace, as you might guess. I was drawn here by the delicious aroma of your feast. Thanks for feeding me. Buggy gets all bashful and sort of like sheepish. No need to be polite. We're all friends here. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, friend. But as he's saying this, Ace has like seated himself and started eating again, which seems to have irritated Buggy. And he says, just because you introduce yourself doesn't mean you get to eat my food. My ship, my banquet, my rules. Everybody else apparently has recognized who Ace is. That he's from Whitebeard's crew, that he's Fire Fist, that he's a big fucking deal. And are basically like, hey Buggy, you may want to lay off because this guy is nobody to fuck with. And Ace just starts to say like, oh yeah, that's, that is the person that I work for. And then he like passes out asleep. And that is the end of the flashback, is him just asleep with his mouth full of food. It's always so weird how the members of Luffy's family all seem to have that like falling asleep mid-sentence thing in common. It's just a very strange trait. So this is when Luffy says, I'm trying to get to level 5. Can you show me how to get there? And Buggy says, no way. You can find your own way down. Do you think I'm your friend now? In fact, you can die down there for all I care. And he starts to walk away with, by the way, this enormous axe on his back. When I say enormous, that axe is the size of like a twin bed. And he is walking out and he says something like, he starts to sort of realize, because Luffy says, there's 10 battleships out there. So if you're thinking you're just going to like stroll on out, that's not going to happen. And Buggy is like, oh, I bet because they're about to execute Ace, that Whitebeard has a bunch of ships coming for him and they're probably expecting an attack on him. This is a really bad time to try and bust out, I guess. Maybe I should just lay low. And Luffy is just like, all right, well, I'll talk to these other prisoners and see if there's anybody else who could help me. And then we see Buggy get this real weird look on his face. And he zeroes in on the arm bracelet. He calls it later an armlet, which to me just sounds like a very tiny arm. I'm sure armlet is correct. Like, you know, it doesn't sound right to me. But anyway, he zeroes in on this. Luffy is about to say, all right, cool, I gotta get moving. And all of a sudden, Buggy jumps on him and is like, wait, never mind, don't go. And he makes a deal. He's telling him, that arm bracelet is really lovely. Do you think you could give it to me, pretty please? If you give it to me, I'll tell you how to find Ace. And Luffy says, all right, you've got a deal. I thought this was surprising, though, because Buggy tells him, yeah, just fork it over, kiddo. And Luffy doesn't say, not until after you've led me through. He doesn't make that demand. And yet, after having just said, fork it over, kiddo, Buggy jumps up into the air and like leaves his feet behind and tells Luffy to grab onto his feet. So it's a weird thing where it sounds like he's going to try and rip Luffy off and, you know, pretend he'll help, but just take the bracelet and go. And then after trying to do that and there being no perceivable pushback from Luffy at all, he completely abandons that plan and begins to lead Luffy after all. So I was just a little confused why they even have it in the dialogue that he says to like fork it over, because if you do have that, then you should have Luffy say not until, or else just don't have Buggy say it. You know, it was a weird moment where he like makes it seem like it's going to be a thing and then he lets it go almost immediately. Then we get a moment that I actually really enjoy and sort of wish we had more of in this series. Buggy is telling Luffy to be careful with his feet. Don't drop them. And then we get a like still frame as it moves out of the way, and the announcer saying, let's review how Buggy's chop chop powers work, shall we? When he chops his body into pieces, he can control each part however he likes, but only within a limited area. And if his feet aren't close to the ground, he becomes unable to levitate the rest of his body. Which is news to me. I am extremely curious if this is an established thing from the start, or if this is being thrown into the pot at this point in order to establish some of the things that happen later. And I can't, you know, like anybody who is, the chat is completely empty again, which I have to assume that part of this is due to the fact that I have changed the room that I'm recording in due to the movement of Crowdcast to version 2. But if there is anybody there listening who can tell me whether or not this was canon in the first place, or if this is I hesitate to call it retcon, because that only refers to making something happen. Making something that has already happened makes sense, after all, even though it didn't seem to make sense at the time. And that's not really what this is. I'm just wondering if it's like a completely new rule that is being established. Gus is here. Hi, Gus. Gus says the only thing that was shown in the early episodes is that his feet can't fly like his other parts can. Okay. I accept then that this rule was established from the start, but they felt the need to remind us of it because it's been a while since we have seen him, and also evidently it wasn't explicitly said in the first place, so they wanted to let us know exactly how that mechanism sort of functions with his power. Okay, for the record, I wouldn't have been mad if they just made up this new rule. I really wouldn't, but I was just curious about it. So, Buggy is running along, congratulating himself on this great deal that he's got when he is about to get this bracelet from Luffy. And we get another flashback. He was on an island and the island had like a big mountain that was sort of skull shaped in the center of it, which I enjoyed the aesthetic of a lot. And he's underground, like going through the different tunnels, and he's with Moji, who is saying, "Are you sure this is the cave where Captain John kept his treasure and the crew he left behind never found it the whole time? This seems a bit too easy." And Buggy is telling him just to shut up and keep walking. "Look alive, boys. The treasure is near, but so is unspeakable danger. If you let your guard down even for a second, death will creep up on you. There's no telling what kind of monsters will appear or what vicious booby traps await to kill us all." And then all of a sudden, they hear these miners coming up behind them. Another lovely day of carving the tunnels. And they're walking in here with a jaunty step and a good attitude, as if this place is just, you know, their own living room, while these dudes are acting like everything is so... They're basically acting like this is completely uncharted territory. Meanwhile, there are all these like electric lights strung up on the walls. They've got their one little lantern. It is a pretty good joke. So for a second, the guy says, who's in charge of all of the miners, is like, "Oh, hey, you must be the new guys." And we get Buggy just chopping up rocks with a pickaxe and talking about how this is all a man needs is, a pickaxe in his hands because it's liberating. After all this labor, we ought to head over to the old bilge barge for it. And then all of a sudden he yells, "How dare you make me work like one of your lackeys?" And this is, I think, at least the second, if not the third time that we have had Buggy somehow get like roped into being a regular worker or helper. And I do really enjoy this recurring joke that actually, if Buggy were to just let himself be a fucking normal person, he could probably be happy with very little. Like, there is a streak in him that seems almost to run counter to the rest of his character. That it's like this toxic ego that overrides an instinctive urge to get along with people and actually make friends and do regular work. And then this voice comes in whispering to him that he needs to like put people in their place and be the best. And it's sort of tragic, you know, like he could probably have a life he's very satisfied with without having to look too far for it. He seems like the kind of guy that if he managed to get over that part of himself, he could be happy almost anywhere. But he keeps ending up in these scrapes, and now he's in prison, you know? And apparently he says, like, we went all over the Grand Line looking for that treasure. As if that wasn't crappy enough, my ill-fated treasure hunts brought me straight to a Navy post one day, and the bastards threw me in this dump when they captured me. But maybe it was destiny all along, guiding me to Captain John's treasure. So he says Captain John, you know, in the tunnel and here. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was thinking it was going to be like Goldie Rogers' treasure. But no, it's a whole different thing. And at this point, he explains to Luffy, this place is like an upside down tower. We're at level 1, but we have to go down through 2 to 5. And the deeper you get, the more infamous the criminals are. It's really funny, though. As he's saying this, we get an animation of the upside down tower. Everything is labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, except for the final layer, which would be 6, except it just has a question mark. And I find it really funny that, like, it doesn't say 6, even though it is 6. Like, everything's just numbered according to where it falls. Do you know what I'm saying? So I don't know what it means that it's just a question mark. So let's see. David says also Captain Bill is mentioned again. I don't remember when he's mentioned. Sorry, David. Gus says Captain John's corpse was one of the general zombies on Thriller Bark, so that's where the armband came from. Oh, that's fun. Okay. So yeah, he says, I haven't gone to level 5. Everything I know about it is just what I've heard from other people. But that's where they put all the highest level prisoners. And with a bounty as big as your brother's was, I'm sure that's where he was put. He says, I've heard some rumors about 5, but the theory is the criminals they send down there are so dangerous they've been completely wiped from history. There's a good chance that's where they took your brother, but the furthest I can take you is level 4, so you're on your own after that. And Luffy says, thanks, Buggy. I thought you were a real jerk, but I guess I was wrong. And Buggy says, well, if that armlet leads me to Captain John's treasure, I'm getting a real bargain, kid. And then claps his hands over his mouth as he realizes what he just said. Luffy continues to converse as if he didn't say this. So for a second, Buggy is like, oh, cool. He wasn't even fucking listening to me. I can't believe I just blurted that out, but it seems like it's fine. I'm glad he's so dumb. But then Luffy is like, wow, so a treasure map on this armband, huh? I had no idea. I guess that'll be really fun. And then we see Buggy's face get really, like, manic for a second. And he's like, well, sorry, kid. If you know the truth, I'll have to kill you. And he pulls his axe out and he turns around ready to attack Luffy, fully like prepared to do it. And when he comes face to face with Luffy, Luffy's got his hand out with the armband in his hand saying, you better take this now in case I forget later. And Buggy is like, what the fuck, dude? I just told you there's a treasure map in it and you're just gonna fucking hand it over? To which Luffy says, treasure's cool and all, but Ace is way more important. And Buggy says, but if you give it to me now, what's to stop me from running off with it and leaving you here to die? And Luffy says, nothing, I guess. But you gave your word you would help me, and that's good enough for me. And we get, after that moment, a sequence of, it's like a monologue. This shit had me laughing so hard, you guys. I was cracking up. There are some things in this show that I could say are objectively funnier than other things. And then there are things like this where I'm like, I feel like this isn't as funny as it seemed to me at the time. I do not know what got me so hard about that. So, first of all, the image is of Buggy crying and snotting, but also with like sparkles floating around him to indicate like he's crying, but in a good way, like a touched and happy way. Those trusting eyes boring into my soul. I'm a scoundrel, Straw Hat. Can't you see? Don't do it. You deserve better than this. I'm no good for you. And there was something about this that felt so like fuckboy telling a girl to stay away from him that it just really got to me. Like, it almost had Edward Cullen vibes a little bit. I just cackled so hard. That got me. It really did. So he does take it, and he has a moment here of like, all right, well, I appreciate that he thinks like, you know, that he's so sweet and thinks so well. But immediately after getting it in his hand, it's just like, all right, how do I ditch you and get the hell out of here? And I just wanted to be like, Buggy, you just found out that there are a bunch of battleships out there and you can't leave. What else have you got to do? You're talking about trying to lay low. Get out of here. Like, stick with Straw Hat. your best bet, honestly, is to stick with him because you can't even fight off the blue gorillas. So, just maybe don't give into your instinct immediately to do your own thing because it's actually a bad idea right now. So as he's thinking about that, he bashes into a wall, by accident, and Luffy thinks he's trying to take a shortcut through the wall, and is like, oh, I can do that, and punches right through it. And they bust right into the midst of a bunch of Navy guys. And it's a real moment. I enjoy Buggy just yelling at him, what the hell is wrong with you? Anytime that Buggy is the one that seems to be acting the most reasonably, it's always a real sign, So this is when we cut over to Boa Hancock, who is still being led on this weird tour. And this also got me laughing pretty hard. So she's thinking to herself about how she hopes Luffy is safe, that she told him to stay out of trouble, but, he's going to do what he's going to do. And probably that was words that just fell on deaf ears. And she's thinking about all of the things that could happen to him if he were caught. And as she's daydreaming here, I love this so much. She's thinking I want you to take care of yourself, and imagines Luffy taking her hand. And then her thoughts get interrupted by somebody trying to get her attention. And it's Hannibal. And we hear the screaming of a prisoner, and Hannibal says, "Woo, that was a good one, wasn't it?" You guys, the whole vibe of Hannibal treating everybody's pain and horror like he's bringing them to a circus, this is some kind of entertainment event, is so hilarious. It's real. I think it's the voice actor that's really taking it to the next level for me. But yeah, saying oh, that was a good one, wasn't it? And then, do you hear that, Empress? Well, not to worry, my lady. There are plenty more blood-curdling screams where those came from. If you don't have a taste for sadism yet, we'll do our darndest to change your mind before this little visit has come to an end. And that really, really is such a funny line. If you don't have a taste for sadism yet. So then she says, "Silence, you accursed fool," and kicks him on the ground and is stepping on him. And of course, my instinctive response here is the thing that, the thing the kids say these days when somebody hot, especially an older, often taller, more imposing woman, when she is hot and really getting to people with her vibe, the kids say, "Step on me," oftentimes "Step on me, mommy," "Step on me, mother," whatever. So as soon as she steps on him, I'm just this feels very kinky, but I didn't think they'd address it. And then almost immediately, Hannibal is just actually, this is kind of hot. And later on, when we meet the Poison Man, he has the exact same response. And I was oh, I thought that was going to remain subtext. Not so. It is text. It is just the text. So anyway, that's what's going on with Boa Hancock. We go back to Luffy and Buggy as Buggy is busting through the wall to the surprise of all of these dudes around them. And, at this point, Buggy is just being carried by Luffy, who's sort of using him as a human shield. And they wind up in this weird place that's a forest. And as they're falling, Buggy is describing that everything here is red. He says, This forest is a torture chamber. Every leaf is as sharp as a razor. That's why they call them blade trees. And the grass is made of spikes that prick you like needles. It's called spike needle grass. Original, I know. The jailers release venomous spiders and chase the prisoners up and down the forest all day long. Deadly pitchforks behind them, piercing needles beneath them, and cutting razors everywhere else. They run until they're drenched in their own blood, suffering agonies they never thought possible. This is level 1, otherwise known as the Crimson Hell. That is too creative. We don't need to be doing this. That's too much. That's too much. So anyway, Luffy is like, aren't we going to get cut if we land like that? And Buggy says, watch this. Listen up, take my feet, and throw them down on the ground right below us. And Luffy's like, okay. And he lets go of Buggy's feet, he's wearing these like little white flats that are very funny to me. Anyway, his feet land and begin to walk by some prisoners who take a moment from being tortured to be like, wow, that's really weird. And then his feet just run underneath them, and he himself can float above all of it, so none of the blades or spikes or anything touches them. So Luffy's basically riding on his back like he's a little hovercraft, is kind of what it feels like. At the center of all of this is a huge opening that looks like a well, except there is no bottom to it that we can see. And Buggy says if there is a way out of here, but nobody wants to take it. Not because it's dark and scary, but because this hole is a one-way trip to level 2. And if you think things are bad here, you ain't seen nothing yet. When people get sent to hell, you better believe they'll try to claw their way out. But no one in their right mind would dream of diving further into the abyss. And Luffy's like, all right, cool. So I just jump in. And Buggy starts to say, be careful because... And before Buggy can finish his sentence, Luffy has jumped. He disappears into the darkness. At first, Buggy is sort of like, damn, kid, like, I can't decide if you're really smart or really stupid. And then he says, oh, actually, this is perfect. I was trying to find a way to ditch him. Now he's out of here. I got the bracelet. This is perfect. Now I can just fucking leave. So he starts to cackle to himself. It's a real prolonged cackle. Before all of a sudden, this was so funny. This episode this was some good shit. He gets hit by an axe, and he turns around to see one of those blue, what are they? Blue gorillas? He's like, I'm a chop fruit. Like, there's no point in using an axe on me. I chop myself up. You know that doesn't do anything, right? But then he turns and looks and sees that his feet have gone over the edge with the rest of his body, and that there is now no choice remaining to him at all except to follow Luffy down. And it's just his head, like, disembodied. He starts to try and, like, float away, just his head, but eventually gets yanked down because of the way, his power works, and it pulls his body down. So, yeah, that's really something. What is going on down at the bottom of this, it turns out, it says the floor of wild beasts from hell. And it turns out a lot of these prisoners get fed to the monsters down here. This is where Mr. 3 turns up. And he's just like, I'm too tired to be afraid anymore. I'm going to be their dinner sooner or later. They may as well feed me to one of these things today, I guess. It's fine. He's got a very fatalist attitude, which you would after living in a fucking place like this. So let's jump to strongest man in the prison next episode. I'm like running short on time here, but I really wanted to talk about all of those moments earlier on. So Buggy is trying to work with Luffy because they are down here with these monsters, and I think he realizes like he's not going to be able to handle them on his own. They have to just sort of like make it work until he can find another way to ditch Luffy. So there is this like growling coming out of the darkness, and it takes a minute, but all of a sudden this little hippo with these tiny little ears appears. And you guys, I don't know who like may not know this about me. Other than raccoons, hippos are pretty much like my favorite animal. Hippos are deceptively strong. Their bodies are so little fat and so heavily muscled that they sink in water, which like almost no mammals do. And they will sprint on the floor of a river or lake and sneak up on prey from underneath like a fucking shark. They are responsible for more deaths in Africa than any other animal, even lions, which is truly insane to me. Like, they are aggressive for no... Lions eat people. Hippos are vegetarians. They don't eat meat, and they attack people just because fuck them, which is an energy I just feel so deeply in my soul. I love that. So anyway, I love a hippo, but then this is like a baby hippo, which is adorable and so makes it even better. And of course, they're both kind of taken off guard by how small it is because they don't think that it could possibly be that much of a danger. And then as Buggy approaches it, this hippo just goes fucking ape shit. And it turns out he can run super fast and will just take a fucking bite out of you, no problem. At one point, this hippo like falls from a height, and the impact he leaves on the floor is a lot bigger than his body is. Like, it's like he can make himself bigger or larger depending on, you know, it's a weird thing. But anyway, there is a moment here where he actually eats part of Buggy. He like eats a leg and torso? I can't even remember what part he eats. But he says like to Luffy, I'll just show you what, you know, the chop fruit can do. And we get to see inside the hippo for a second where Buggy like grabs his, I can't remember what it's called, the little part of the back of your throat that hangs down, and like grabs it and yanks on it so the thing stops and sort of spits him out. So that seems to take the hippo out of the running for the moment. But throughout all of this, we've got transponder snails that are watching them. So the rest of the security team is beginning to figure out who's all escaped and where they are. And this is when things begin to go a little bit left. So they run into a group, like a bunch of cells with all of these dudes yelling and telling them like, oh, you must be angels to be down here. And it's, you know, very clear that our friends were going to have no, oh my God, you guys, I forgot about the praying mantis who gets stuck. He has like blades on his arms, but they get stuck in the ground. I swear to God, that shit was so funny. But anyway, they went, these dudes, like, it seemed pretty obvious to me that our friends were not going to be saving these guys. Like, that was not the priority. And then all of a sudden, Buggy stops and is kind of like, wait a second, actually, maybe I should do this. So he lets all of them out, and he like drops the keys so they can unlock their manacles and everything. And these guys, he's like, oh good, they're all gonna owe me, I got them out of here. And I think he's thinking that'll be part of his overall escape plan. But then later on, these dudes come running back, and it turns out, like, they realize, oh, there's no way to escape this place. We forgot. Like, it's safer, if anything, for us to just stay here than it is to go out and, like, attempt to escape and maybe die. And I love that Buggy had been about to try and ditch Luffy. They have a whole, like, screaming match about it. But the second that he realizes none of his backup is actually going to have his back, and they don't feel any debt to him anymore, he just does take backsies and is like, never mind. How about we stick together after all? So we go back to Boa, and I love this, guys. She's, this blonde officer, she's talking to Boa, and she's like, I forgot to mention it before, but the warden ate the venom fruit, so he's a poison man. And Boa says, poison man? And this woman just says, yes, please be careful. And I'm like, girl, I'm gonna need you to give me a little bit more than, oh, heads up, he's a poison man. I do not know what that means, and you're going to have to be a lot more specific. She just says this shit like Boa should know. And the way Boa responds, it's clear she does not know. So go ahead and give her some info, lady, But she doesn't. So then we get our introduction to this poison man, who, it turns out, eats poison and gets the shits. His name is Magellan, and I cannot, with all of the, like, potty humor with this guy. He's got these huge horns as well, which, it's an interesting thing that, like, he's got horns, he's got bat wings, and I'm like, what exactly is it that we're trying to say with this particular outfit? Because with Moria, it felt like a little bit of a Tim Burton character design, which made sense because he was on what felt like just a straight up Halloween themed island. But this dude, I don't know what it is I'm supposed to be getting. Like, it's almost a little bit like Satan, but it's like not quite at that level. I don't know. But this overall design actually goes well together in a way a lot of the others don't. I like the way this dude is designed. I love when he says, like, my dinner upset my stomach. Hannibal says, probably because it was poison. And then in the best, this voice actor who's doing Magellan, oh, come on. I'm a poison man. I love poison. I have, like, that sounds like the kind of thing that, like, your 6-year-old would say. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God. This is so funny. Oh, I love it so much. I'm a poison man. I love poison. Oh, God, that's good. Let's see. Oh, sorry. David says, what literary reference with Satan does this island serve up? Yeah, I guess it could be like the levels of hell and, like Dante. And we do have like the Crimson Hell. So maybe he is just meant to be designed straight up after Satan. He's got a pitchfork, it looks like, here too, which I didn't notice. So yeah, maybe it's just that. That's pretty funny though. He says, how's that old saying go? Poison kills poison? Yeah, you guys know that saying. This character, I don't know, I kind of like him. But anyway, this dude, Hannibal, is like, well, can you show them to Fire Fist? And Hannibal is like, come on, man. I'm not supposed to do that. But then, of course, we have a whole thing with him exhaling and his poison gas breath that can, like, hurt people. But Hancock jumps on him, steps on him, and you dare try to breathe your poison gas on me? And he says, she's stepping on me, and I think I like it, which Hannibal says, lucky punk. But, of course, then Boa does the whole, hey, well, could you bring me to see Fire Fist Ace, like, right away? And immediately he's like, sure, no problem. This is when the news comes down that there are some prisoners that have escaped as well. So she's just saying this to sort of distract him from the whole thing. We kind of need you to deal with this, Warden. Wake up. He will not wake up. The Warden is busy, just thirsting. So all of these dudes who are in security are running around trying to find their guy. We go back to Buggy and Luffy, and Luffy has been busted on some monsters using third gear, so he is very, very small, and Buggy had not seen this ability yet and is really kind of like, what the fuck is going on, when he sees him turn large again. This is when we get the whole sequence with all of the prisoners, which was really funny. And then we have Mr. 3, who comes out and is just like, I'm a man who always pays his debts. And I love that Luffy then says, do I know you? And Mr. 3 is so bummed because Luffy doesn't remember him. And he has to hold his hair up. And then Luffy's like, oh, it's the 3 hair. And it's a 3 and it's on fire. And we get a flashback of the wax power that he had. And he's like, oh yeah, candle lock, this should be perfect, and turns himself into that giant swinging mallet. And I had forgotten about the whole thing of like being able to make copies of himself because he can make figures out of wax, basically, in what seems to be almost no time. And I, the whole way that all of this goes is I was glad to get a refresh because I had forgotten that none of them move, evidently. So him being like, how did you know which one was me? And it's just like, well, the one that moves and talks is probably the one. So anyway, there's like, that's the end of Luffy. And then we have a small moment where Sengoku is getting the report about Luffy busting into the jail. And this security guy is like, I don't know why a pirate would sneak into Impel Down. Do you have any clue what he might be planning? And Sengoku says, well, I don't care what he's planning. This is it for him. He is not getting out of it. And we get to see, like, from underwater, the way Impel Down is built. It's weird because it has like balconies and stuff, which I'm like, what is the purpose? But he says that their defenses are legendary and they're prepared for almost any situation. It was the guard's incompetence that allowed him to enter, but either way, Straw Hat will never leave that place alive. Only one man has. And he says it was 20 years ago, the first and only person in the history of Impel Down to escape, a pirate named Shiki the Golden Lion. And that is how the episode ends. And I'm extremely interested in seeing Shiki the Golden Lion because there is a Lion Man character in Cradle, and I'm really wondering how much of this character was inspiration for that. But, it may be very little, but I'm just interested. So, all right, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. This show is such a ride. I cannot wait to start the live action this coming Thursday. My bad. And I hope that you all will join me for that as well. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.